The candle burns low, a trembling flame that seems to breathe with the room itself. Its light bends over uneven walls where the plaster has long since cracked and fallen away. The floor is a scatter of straw, and in that straw the slow rhythm of life can be heard. A family lies pressed close, their bodies coiled into one another, their breath rising and falling like a tide. They do not dream alone. In this place, dreams have no privacy, only the closeness of skin and the warmth of bodies in the long cold night. Outside, the mist clings to the thatched roof, as if even the fog wishes to stay and listen. The air carries the faint, earthy smoke of a dying peat fire. It seeps into every thread of their clothes. The dog at the door shifts and sniffs at it. Restless, then silence again. Not the kind of silence that is empty, but the silence that is full of every small sound. The creak of the wooden beams as they sigh, the scratching of a mouse in the wall, the slow exhale of a child whose belly has known too many days of little food. These walls have heard it all before. They know the habits of hunger doubt in this fragile stillness. The night is not what we know. It is not one long stretch of forgetting. It is a broken thing. There is a first sleep and then a second, and between them, an hour when the world is neither day nor night. The family stirs when the candle has nearly spent itself. They rise into the cold. Their movements are slow and their eyes are half shut, but this is their way. Hands reach for the spindle, the mending, the wooden cups, the rosary. Words are whispered, but not loudly enough for the children to hear. This hour belongs to the things that cannot be said in daylight. A woman prays in the corner, her breath fogging in the cold air. A man pulls a piece of torn leather closer to the light, trying to mend it with a bone needle and rough thread. The eldest boy stares at the shuttered window as if he can see past it, past the walls, into the fog that presses against the hut. These moments of waking in the dark are like a small secret, a pause in the long march of hours, where fear and hope both rise up from the ground beneath their feet. Beyond these walls, the custom is the same. In monasteries, when the first part of the night has passed, the bells call the brothers from their hard wooden boards. Bare feet step onto cold stone. They rise from sleep and walk into the freezing dark to kneel and chant. Breath gathers before their bowed heads, a pale cloud that looks like incense. Their voices rise as one, not to comfort but to endure. They return to their beds only when the hour has passed, and the next part of the night waits to claim them. In manor houses, it is different, yet not so different. The rich sleep in beds that look like shrines, carved and curtained, guarded by walls of stone. The room is warmer, and the sheets smell of lavender. Yet even there, the same strangeness holds. Sleep comes, then leaves, and then comes again. Servants, lying on benches or straw at the edge of the chamber, wake quietly during that space in the night. Some whisper, some sue, some sit in the silence staring at the embers in the grate. It is as though the night itself were a long road with a gate in the middle. Everyone passes through it. Some with prayers, some with work, some with their eyes wide open, afraid of the things that stir in the dark. The family in the little room lie down again when their quiet tasks are done. The candle has burned almost to the end, the wick drowning in its own wax. The boy pulls the rough blanket over his head. The father lowers himself slowly to the straw, the sound of the cold floor loud in the stillness. The dog settles back against the door and lets out a long breath. And in the second sleep, something changes. It is a deeper place where the cold is forgotten for a time. Perhaps they dream of fields green again, or of bread still warm from the fire. Outside, the mist begins to rise from the earth as the first faint color of dawn comes crawling across the sky. The roof drips, the shutters shake with the wind. The second sleep holds them until that gray light touches the cracks in the door. For these people, sleep is not a luxury. It is a way of holding the dark at bay. It is a way of waiting for another day that will be just as difficult as the one before. Yet inside that narrow room, on a bed made of straw and hunger, there's also something else. There's the shared warmth that keeps them alive. There's the rhythm of their breathing, a quiet rebellion against the cold. There's the strange, slow trust of falling into the night twice, and when the light finally comes, it falls on faces that will rise to walk again through the mud of their fields, through the streets of their towns, through the cloisters of their monasteries. The candle is gone, the mist thins. The second sleep gives way to the day, and with it, to another story waiting beyond the door. The door opens, and the cold air rushes in. Somewhere far away, a bell begins to ring. Its sound climbs over the roofs, over the fields, over the stone towers. The day has come again. But in the stillness that lingers just before they rise, you can almost hear the echo of that strange hour in the middle of the night, the whispering, the prayers, the breath of those who live their lives in fragments. Of dark and light. It is here, in this broken rhythm of the night, that we step further into the lives of those who will carry us to the next chapter, where the shadow of hunger follows them into the day. The wind moves through the town like a restless ghost, slipping down narrow alleys, curling around doorframes, carrying the bitter stench of tanneries and the sting of hearth smoke. It clings to the stone of the houses, to the uneven shutters, to the worn wooden doors that hold back the night. Beyond those doors, life presses close. Inside one such house, the air is colder than it should be. The stone walls hold the night, as if it were a living thing, and the floor beneath is damp as a grave. In the center of the room stands a bed, nothing more than a wooden frame stuffed with straw. The smell of dry grass clings to the sheets, but the sheets themselves are rough, stiff as parchment, their edges worn to threads. The only warmth is found in the bodies that lie together under a single coarse cloak, a huddled island in a sea of cold air. Children, pale from too many days of empty meals, lie curled like small animals in the hollows their parents' bodies have made. They bury their faces into the weave of the fabric, eyes closed, lips dry. A cradle stands at the far end of the room, rocking on its own with every gust that snakes in through the gaps around the door. There is no hand to steady it, only the whisper of the wind and the faint creak of the wood. The fire in the corner has been reduced to embers. Its glow is dull, like dried blood on stone. Shadows reach long across the walls, turning cracks into dark rivers. Rats stir there, soft and close, their claws scratching against the floorboards. No one looks at them anymore. Hunger has made them a part of the room, as ordinary as the straw underfoot or the smell of wet wool. Here, sleep is not the kind of rest that brings peace. It is an uneasy truce, an agreement made with the cold, with the noise of the streets, with the slow gnawing of the belly. Dreams come heavy, shaped by the tolling of bells somewhere out in the mist, by the drip of water falling from a roof beam, by the rumble of a cart's wooden wheels over cobblestones far away. Even in sleep, the town does not let go. Its noises slip through the thin walls like thieves. The parents lie close to their children, arms wrapped around them, bodies a shield against the chill. The father's hand rests on the edge of the bed, palm flat against the rough wood, as if to anchor himself to something solid in a life that offers little. The mother breathes slowly, eyes open for a moment before she closes them again. She listens to the sound of the cradle, to the sound of rats, to the sound of her own heart. In the streets beyond, voices rise and fall. A drunkard sings a line of some old song, his voice cracked and thin. A cartwheel bumps over a stone, its rhythm fading into the distance. Dogs bark. Somewhere, a door slams shut. These sounds never end. They are the lullaby of the poor. And yet, in this bed, there is a kind of safety. It comes from the nearness of others, from the feel of another person's breathing on your neck, From the shared heat that fights against the winter air, the bed becomes like a raft on black water, carrying them together over a sea that has no mercy. The cradle keeps rocking. The embers fade to ash. The rats scratch and then go still. And slowly, the sound of breathing fills the room until it is the only sound. Hours pass in this uneasy calm, until the bells ring again in the distance, their sound rising through the mist. It is the sound of the town waking, though no one in. This house wants to wake yet, for when morning comes, the truce is over. Hunger will open its mouth again, and the day will begin with its sharp teeth. But for now, as the faintest gray light begins to slip beneath the door, they hold on to the last moments of this fragile rest. The cold presses against the walls, but it cannot break through the warmth of the small bodies huddled together. For a little while longer, they drift, together, through the Black Sea. And when the door opens at last, when a draft of morning air comes crawling in to steal the last of the night, they will rise into a day that is no kinder than the one before. The stones outside will still be wet. The alleys will still be filled with smoke and the smell of tanneries. The carts will still rumble, and the bells will still toll. But something waits at the edge of this. Dawn, a shadow that will stretch further than hunger or cold. It begins with the stirring of unrest, with the slow gathering of rumors, with the kind of whispers that pass from one mouth to another in the dark. Soon, these streets, these stones, these cold rooms will hold more than just the suffering of the poor. Something else is coming, and as the wind slips once more through the alley, carrying the scent of smoke and the faint cry of a gull from the river, the cradle rocks one last time on its own. Its creak becomes a hinge, a quiet turning, and another chapter of the story begins to open. The night inside the manor is heavy, like a held breath. Behind the thick stone walls, a hush gathers, as if the air itself has been taught obedience. Curtains of coarse wool, dyed deep and dark, fall around a raised bed, closing it off from the rest of the chamber, as if this narrow square of wood and cloth were a holy altar. Within it, there's the closeness of too many layers, furs thick. As winter fields, the faint sweetness of lavender packed into tiny stitched pouches, the heat of warming pans resting under the sheets and carrying with them the iron scent of their metal. The smell of smoke from the day's fire has sunk into every fold of the blankets. Clinging as stubbornly as memory. The Lord lies on his back, eyes closed but not fully surrendered to sleep. His right hand rests near the edge of the bed, where a dagger waits, its blade catching a faint line of silver light. Beside him, on the far side, the lady sleeps with her body turned away, a gulf of carved wood and propriety between them, their closeness a matter of duty but never touch. Beyond this island of furs, near the foot of the bed, shadows stretch long and low. These shadows are the servants, their bodies curled on thin pallets, their heads close to the cold floor. Their rest is shallow, light as the flick of a candle, for they have been taught to wake at any sound that does not belong. Above them, the rafters watch. Bundles of dried herbs dangle from the beams, thyme, rosemary, fennel, their scent falling through the air like a kind of ghost. They are hung there to keep away sickness, to guard the sleepers from the fevers that move like wolves through the land. Even in sleep, fear has its place in the room. It sits quietly like another servant waiting in the corner. Through the narrow panes of glass, moonlight tries to come in, but fails to cross more than a small patch of the bedstead. Outside, a wind moves through the courtyard. It stirs the leaves of the orchard, slips over the kennel, and shakes the chain of a hound that barks once, twice, before sinking back into silence. The crickets carry on their own low music, as steady as the beating of a drum far away. Inside, the chamber breathes. Each rise and fall of a chest, each shift of a blanket, speaks a different truth. The sound is small, but it fills the room, a reminder that even here, behind walls meant to hold back the world, No one can sleep without the weight of it pressing in. Sleep in this house is not a simple act. It is a ceremony. It is a measure of who stands above and who lies below. The lords and ladies are given the weight of blankets, the heat of warming pans, the curtain walls that shut out even the flicker of a servant's gaze. The poor stretch out on rushes, unguarded, their backs chilled by stone. Here, even in the dark, rank is a thing you can feel with your hands, and yet the breath of the rich is no steadier than the breath of those lying at their feet. Dreams reach all of them, crossing lines of rank with no regard for walls. The Lord's fingers twitch, and in the dark, he dreams of roads and battles, of debts not yet paid. The lady turns in her sleep, haunted by things she does not say in daylight. One servant's lips move silently, whispering a prayer learned from his mother long ago, while another, younger, lies awake, staring into the dark and listening to the rafters creak above. The room waits. It listens. Sometimes there are noises that belong only to the night, a creak, a muffled sigh, the slow crackle of a dying coal. And sometimes there are noises from far beyond, a low hoot of an owl near the gate, the distant rumble of hooves on the road, a shout carried faintly from the fields. But none of these things break the rhythm of the house. It has learned to live with them, to let them pass like the wind. The moon moves across the sky, and the light on the bedstead begins to fade. Shadows take its place. In this slow turning of the hours, the boundaries between sleep and waking blur. A servant opens his eyes and sees the faint glint of the dagger by the Lord's hand. He closes them again and tells himself that everything is as it should be. The lady's breath softens, but in her dream, she's walking through a corridor of trees with no end. The Lord stirs once, grips the dagger without meaning to, then lets it go. Beyond the chamber, the manor sleeps. Dogs by the gate, grooms in the stables, scullery boys on beds of straw in the kitchen. Every hallway holds its own silence. Every shutter holds back the same cold wind. And still, the crickets sing. When morning comes, it will break these shadows apart. The curtain will be drawn. The servants will rise like ghosts, silent and quick, to stir the fire and bring warmth to the room. The Lord will wake, eyes sharp and ready. The lady will turn her face to the light, and the quiet ceremony of the night will be folded away, ready to be repeated again when darkness falls. But for now, in this hour before dawn, the chamber waits in its deep stillness. The dagger lies on the edge of the bed, untouched. The silver line of moonlight fades. And somewhere beyond these thick walls, beyond the orchards and the gate, the world begins to change. Whispers are moving through the villages. There is unrest in the distance, a restlessness in the wind. And as the hound at the gate stirs once more and lets out a low, uneasy growl, the night feels thinner, as if it knows that safety, even here, cannot last. A bell cuts through the dark like a blade. The sound rolls down the stone halls of the monastery, shivering against the cold walls, spilling into the sleeping cells where men lie like fallen branches. No bed waits here, no softness. Only planks, narrow and hard, and the faint weight of a wool robe pulled over weary shoulders. The brothers rise at once, as if the bell had entered their very bones. Bare feet meet the frozen floor. The smell of wax and cold stone follows them. As they gather in the corridor, their breath turning pale in the torchlight, they do not speak. The only voices allowed here belong to the prayers waiting ahead. The chapel stands as a hollow mouth of shadow, and into it they walk. Candles, thin as reeds, fight against the dark, their flames shaking in the winter air that leaks through cracks. In the door, the sound of chanting begins low, carried by tired throats, and then rises like a slow tide, filling the cold air. Breath becomes prayer. Prayer becomes a wall between them and the night. Their voices do not warm them. The chill clings to their bodies, seeping into the skin until it feels like stone. They stand anyway. They bow and kneel on bare knees. The floor is damp beneath them, the scent of old wax heavy, the taste of the dark like iron. This hour is not for sleep, not for comfort. It is for remembering, for lifting every shadow of their lives into the air and offering it to something greater. When the chanting fades, it leaves behind a stillness so complete it feels carved. They walk back down the stone corridors, the rhythm of their steps soft and even, as if they were one body. There is no rush. There is no longing. Only duty. They lie again upon their narrow planks. The wood presses into the spine, into the hips, but no one moves to seek comfort. Here, discomfort is not an enemy. It is a teacher. The mind is meant to be empty, the body obedient. Sleep comes not as an escape, but as a thin covering over the waiting bell. And so the night divides itself. An hour of rest, then prayer, then rest again. A cycle that turns and turns until the body no longer knows how to lie still. Even in their brief dreams, the bell waits, ready to pull them back. In this place, rest is a form of discipline. To sleep too deeply is to forget. To forget is to drift away from the life they chose when they crossed the gates. The silence here has weight. It is not the easy quiet of a field, nor the restless hush of a town. It is deliberate. Every sound, even the scratch of a mouse in the wall, feels like a wrong note in a vast, careful music. The stars above the cloister show themselves through a small barred window. They look cold, sharp-edged, like nails hammered into a black board. Beyond those stars lies a world the brothers no longer belong to. Here, time is measured only by the bell. The hours pass. The wind outside combs through the cloister garden, bending the herbs that grow there, carrying the scent of wet soil to the narrow cells. A candle sputters, fighting not to die. Somewhere a crow stirs, beating its wings against the stone roof. When the final stretch of night begins to thin, the bells do not sound again. Dawn comes first, spilling across the cloisters like melted gold, touching the wet stones until they shine. The air shifts. The light pours through the barred window, finding the bowed heads of men who have given everything to the silence. The brothers stand once more, slow, stiff, and ready. Their prayers rise into this new light, their voices carrying through the hall and over the walls, spilling into the waking fields beyond. And there, outside the gates, the world waits, hungry, unquiet, and unrepentant. What moves beyond those walls will soon find its way in. But for now, in this moment, the monastery holds, as fragile and as steady as a flame cupped in careful hands. By the time the light fully takes the stones, the bells will sound again, not to call them from sleep, but to send them out, beyond their safe walls. And what they encounter there will change everything that silence tries to keep safe. A thin cry of wind comes first, winding through the reeds and straw, pulling at the thatch of a poor hut at the edge of the village. It rattles the roof, moves the walls as if testing their strength, and then slips away, leaving only the sound of slow, steady breathing in the dark. Inside, the floor is bare earth, beaten flat by years of feet. A thin scattering of straw lies. Across it, more gesture than comfort, as if the ground might be softened by kindness alone. The walls are daubed with clay that has begun to crack, and through the cracks, cold air seeps in. A mother sits awake against the wall, knees pulled tight. To her chest, her arms wrapped around them as though to hold herself together. The shape of her body is bent, as if she has learned to make herself small in this world. Her eyes move across the hut to where her children lie in a heap, their small shoulders rising and falling, their thin faces half hidden beneath a single patched blanket. The air inside smells of smoke, of the damp soil of the floor, of boiled cabbage long eaten, and of the goats that sleep just beyond the door. It is the smell of their lives. She listens to it as one listens to a song they cannot change. The night has been long. Sleep for her has been a thing that slips in and out like the wind, never staying long enough to warm her. A child whimpered earlier, and she smoothed the hair back from a fevered brow. Dogs barked out in the lane. The roof creaked and whispered above them, as though it too was trying to stay awake. And yet, there are moments when the world stills. She feels it now. The hut holds its breath. The children, for once, sleep without stirring. Their breathing becomes soft, almost even, and in that rhythm she hears something sacred. It is a hymn, low and steady, as if their lungs alone can pray. Her head tilts toward the door. She can hear the wind moving again, a slow hand over the straw roof, a faint whistle as it finds the cracks. Somewhere out there in the dark are other huts, other mothers sitting just as she does, holding the night together by sheer will. Beyond the huts, there are the fields, heavy with mud, and the church that stands in the middle of the village, its bell waiting for the first light to ring. Her thoughts turn toward the feast that will come in a few days, Saint's Day. She wonders if she can find something to barter for honey. Honey to mix with bread so that for one day, her children might taste sweetness instead of bitterness. She closes her eyes and sees it, golden and thick, imagined on their tongues. The wind pushes at the roof once more, then drifts off. A goat stirs, its hooves scratching against the door. The fire, long gone to ash, leaves only a faint scent of smoke, a ghost of heat that never was enough. Her fingers rub against each other in the dark. They are rough, cracked, hardened by work that begins before dawn and does not end. The smallest child turns in sleep, reaching for a patch of warmth. The mother rises then, crossing the room silently, and tucks the blanket closer around them. All. She lingers for a moment, brushing her knuckles lightly against a cold cheek. There are no walls here to keep out the hunger, or the sickness, or the day that waits beyond morning. The hut is little more than a shell. But for these few hours, before the world begins to ask its price, there is this, the closeness of bodies, the shared breath that rises like fog into the cold air. She returns to her place by the wall and waits. The hours stretch out, long and thin. The first hint of gray comes at the small window, so faint it could be a dream. She listens as the quiet starts to break apart. A rooster far away, the bark of a restless dog, the shuffle of something moving in the lane. The breathing of her children holds steady, but she knows it will not last. Soon they will stir, and the day will begin with its hard demands. She will step out into the cold, gather wood, and carry water until her back burns. There will be little to give and much to endure. But for now, the room is still. The breath of her children is still a hymn. And she, in the half-light, whispers a prayer of her own, soft enough that only the straw on the floor hears it. When the sun rises, it will paint the fields gold, but that gold will not be hers. It will fall on the church roof, on the Lord's house, on the carts in the lane. And yet, she will look up and see it. For a moment, she will believe it touches her too. Beyond the village, beyond this hour, something waits. A hunger not of the belly but of the land itself. A change that will soon sweep through huts like this one. But in this thin space before dawn, she sits with the only thing she owns that the wind cannot take. The sound of her family breathing, soft and patient, binding them to the coming day. The wind strikes first, hard against the shutters, as though it has been waiting for this very moment to remind the inn that the road outside never sleeps. The wood groans, the latch holds. Inside, a single candle quivers on the windowsill, its small flame bending under every breath of the draft. Its light spills over a narrow room where sleep is not a private thing, but a shared struggle, held loosely by strangers who will never know each other's names. The boards of the floor creak, beneath bodies that have dropped where they could. Pressed side by side on benches, pallets, or straw spread thin over the cold wood. There are no beds here, not for those who pass through. The smell of them gathers in the air, leather wet with frost, wool cloaks heavy with the smoke of other Fires, sweat that has dried on long roads, and the sour-sweet tang of wine clinging to breath. Boots are pulled close, tucked beneath arms or beneath heads, for the road teaches every traveler to guard what they carry. Even in their dreams, voices have thinned since the common room emptied. What was loud and crowded below has become a hush. Above, broken only by the sound of a body turning, a cough swallowed into the dark, the long sigh of someone surrendering, finally, to exhaustion. A man from the north clutches his satchel to his chest, his arms wrapped around it as though it were a child. A girl no older than 15 lies curled in the corner, her face turned toward the wall, her braids spread out across her shoulder like a line drawn between her and the rest. Near the window, a soldier keeps his eyes open, staring up into the rafters as if the beams themselves hold back the weight of something he does not dare to dream. From below comes the muffled sound of feet, the scrape of a bench on a stone floor, a laugh too late in the night. Then the door closes, and the inn sinks back into its own long-held rhythm, the sound of breath rising and falling in uneven measure, of bodies shifting on rough planks, of the candle whispering as it burns low. This is a bed made of the road itself, no softness, no curtain, no place to call one's own. And yet here, under the same roof, strangers share the kind of nearness that only the cold can demand. A shoulder brushes a stranger's arm. A dream is spoken in a murmur that no one remembers in the morning. For one night, lives that have crossed, deserts and forests, towns and rivers, come to rest for a handful of hours in the same square of air outside. The wheels of a cart groan over the frozen earth. A horse snorts into the dark, stamping its hooves, shaking free a shower of ice from its mane. Somewhere far enough away that it sounds like memory, a bell strikes, slow and heavy, its note rolling over the snow-covered fields. The soldier near the window closes his eyes at last. The girl's breathing steadies, and she sinks deeper into the wall as if it might hold her there, safe until morning. The man from the north tightens his hold on the satchel once more, his lips forming a silent word, a name perhaps, before. His jaw softens and his body slackens into rest. The candle lowers itself, a slow descent into a smaller and smaller shape, until the wick curls black and the last little glow holds on like a stubborn thought. The wind presses again against the shutters, rattling them as though it cannot believe that this room will resist. But it holds. For now it holds Dot, and in that space, in the thin distance between the creak of the timbers and the next gust of the wind, there is a rare kind of stillness. It is not peace. It is only the pause between leaving and arriving, between two cities that will ask much of these travelers when the road takes them on again. Dawn is not far. It will come with its pale light spilling across the boards, across the faces of those who have slept in fits and starts, across the walls blackened by years of smoke. The voices will rise again, and the feet will begin to move, and the world outside will swallow them whole. But for now, in this one brief night, the road has given them a roof. For now they breathe the same cold air, and that is enough. And somewhere beyond these walls, beyond the curve of the frozen track, the world waits, already stirring, ready to remind them that this rest is only borrowed. A torch guttered in the corridor, then died, and the castle seemed to fold itself into the black. Down in the great hall, the night was heavy. The stone walls held the cold like a buried sin, refusing to release it. In the dark, the breath of men and women drifted faintly above the rush-strewn floor, turning to pale ghosts in the air before vanishing back into silence. The hall had been loud once. Hours earlier, it shook with the crack of laughter, the clatter of knives, the ringing of goblets. Now it smelled of what had been left behind: roasted boar carved to the bone, spiced wine soaking into the straw, and the wet wool of cloaks left too close to the fire. Those smells clung to the air like a second skin. The long table that had held the feast was bare now, its trestles pulled aside. On the flagged floor, pallets of straw and torn cloaks became beds for guards and servants alike. They lay close to the hearth, where a few glowing logs still whispered and hissed, sending up a faint orange glow that painted the sleepers in slow, trembling light. Their bodies curled toward that warmth like petals around a flame that was nearly spent. Above them, the star held its own dreams. Behind carved wooden doors, the Lord and his family slept, their chamber thick with fur and embroidered hangings. But here below, there was no curtain to shield one from the cold. A sword lay by every man's hand. The metal hilts glinted faintly, ready even in the middle of the night, as if danger could creep in at any moment. Dot in the corners of the room, shadows pooled, deep and unbroken. One tapestry swayed in the draft, the figures of a hunt stitched into it seeming to move. A stag caught forever in flight, hounds straining on frozen leashes, a hunter's arm raised high with no sound to follow. From outside came the hollow cry of the wind as it circled the battlements. It pressed against the shutters, searching for a way in. The hall answered with the creak of beams and the low settling sound of the stones themselves. A guard stirred, propped himself up on one elbow, and listened. Somewhere deep inside the walls, water dripped. Far off, an iron hinge groaned. He let himself down again, the sound of his armor a faint clink in the quiet, and his eyes closed, though not fully. Sleeping here is a shallow thing. It holds for a time, but it is always listening. The men dream of hooves on frozen ground, of an enemy's hand at the gate, of a shout breaking the dark. Even the servants, curled under cloaks, rest as if the night might summon them without. Warning. Near the hearth, a boy whose duty is to tend the fire lifts one of the smaller logs and pushes it closer to the coals. Sparks leap upward and fade before reaching the high roof. His hands are raw with cold. When the log catches, the flames show the faces around him for just a moment. The tightness of a jaw, the hollow of a cheek, the pale gleam of a scar across a brow. Then the light shrinks back and the room is dim again. This hall, even in stillness, is alive. It breathes with the sleepers, with the slow dying of the fire, with the wind that circles the castle and rattles at its doors. Every brick and beam holds memory. Every shadow carries a watch, somewhere above, in the closed rooms of the lords. Family. A child turns in a feather bed and pulls a fur across their face. But down here, on the stone floor, men and women dream with one hand resting on their swords, as though the night itself were a battlefield. The hours pass, slow and heavy. One log collapses into embers. The boy curls into himself and lets his head drop to his arms. Soon, there will be dawn. The walls will blush gray, the torches will be lit again, and the castle will open its eyes. But for now, it lies in this dark pause, a single body that never truly sleeps, listening for what the next breath of the wind may bring. And beyond these walls, out there in the black, something stirs on the frozen road that leads to the gate. Fox screams in the distance, a thin, tearing cry that rips through the night and fades into the open fields. The road lies pale under the starlight, a thread of pale dust stretching on and on, even now when no one can see where it leads. And beside it, in the hollows of hedgerows and against the worn knees of stone crosses, the pilgrims settle into the earth as though it is the only thing that has ever waited for them. Cloaks wrap around bodies like shells, and the bags that once pressed against aching shoulders are drawn beneath tired heads. The air is cold, but it carries a sweetness, the faint scent of crushed grass, of heather, of herbs tied in little bundles on belts for luck. Somewhere, a pouch of rosemary opens in the dark, and the wind carries its sharp green breath down. The line of sleepers. There is talking at first, the low murmur of voices, one thread cutting across another, stories of shrines and bones, of water that healed a blind man, of the mile still ahead. A boy asks an old woman if she has ever seen the golden reliquary at Canterbury, and the woman's voice trembles as she tells him no, but she hopes she will. There are prayers, some whispered as if secrets, some spilling out and half forgotten. Latin, the kind that is more feeling than words. The firelight comes next, small and careful, only enough to hold back a little of the dark. Around it, hands open, palms up, to catch a few moments of warmth. But wood is scarce, and when the flames shrink to embers, no one stirs to feed them. One by one, the voices go out like candles. The bodies shift, restless, finding comfort on the uneven ground. Sleep here does not come in one piece. It breaks often. A fox moves. A leather strap creaks. The slow tread of a stranger, arriving late, shakes someone half awake. They glance up, see only a figure passing, and sink back down. Overhead, the stars hang like a wide roof, deeper and larger than any church vault. The moon brushes the road with silver so pale it looks like water frozen midstream. Somewhere far away, a chapel bell rings, faint and thin, carried by the night air. For some, that sound seeps into their dreams. For others, it keeps them awake. Eyes open, waiting for the slow return of dawn. In the dark, a pilgrim turns on his side, clutching a wooden cross against his chest as if it will hold the cold away. He thinks of home, of the wife who wept when he left, of the sins he cannot name aloud. He thinks of the shrine ahead, and the hope that something might be lifted from him when he stands before it. And though their bodies lie apart, though none know each other's names, there's a strange kinship in this rough sleep. The road binds them, draws their breaths into the same rhythm, their hopes into the same shape. It is as if the earth beneath them is listening, keeping every dream and every fear as it has done for centuries. When the morning comes, it will not come gently. It will come with stiff backs and raw feet, with the smell of dew on wool cloaks and the sound of crows. They will rise, shake the dust from their hair, shoulder their packs, and walk again, leaving only flattened grass to show that they were ever there. But for these few hours, between the stars and the soil, they belong to the night, to the wandering bed of the pilgrim road, to a sky that seems to stretch forever, leading them on long before their feet take them there. And as the moon sinks behind the hedges, the bell rings again, far away, calling them forward even as they sleep. A single gull cries out in the dark, a ragged sound carried by the wind, and the night closes over it like a hand. In the heart of the fishing town, the sea owns everything. It stains the beams of the houses, it soaks into the ropes and nets, and it clings to every thread of clothing. Even when the sun has long fallen, its breath still presses through the shutters. Sharp and wet, the houses crouch low, timber-bird shapes with shutters that tremble in the wind like old teeth. Beneath them, the earth is damp. Above them, the clouds hang heavy, refusing the light of the stars. Inside one narrow home, the day's work sleeps in the corners, nets heavy with the ghost of fish, oars leaning tiredly against the wall, ropes coiled like dark serpents, still slick from the sea. Up the ladder in a loft above these tools. A family gathers close on a bed that is hardly a bed at all, canvas thrown over bundles of reeds, their fragrance dry and grassy beneath the sharp tang of the day's catch. The smell of fish, of salt, of tar never leaves. It settles into the skin and follows them into their dreams. The children curl against their parents as the tide continues its endless chant. The rhythm of the waves is an old cradle, older than the house, older than the town, rocking them toward sleep. Sometimes the house itself seems to sway as if it too remembers the sea. The glow of the single oil lamp downstairs fades and shrinks until it is only a thin memory on the wall. Shadows gather on the oars, turning their shapes into long bent arms reaching out. Hooks glint faintly, small and silver, catching the last light like stars caught on the wrong side of the horizon. And still, the sea speaks. It rolls and retreats, pulling the shore apart grain by grain. Out on the beach, the tide leaves behind its quiet offering. Shells strewn across the sand, pale as coins, gleaming in the wash of the moon. Sleep here is light, always touched by the sound of water. It comes like fog, not fully, not deeply. For even in rest, there is a kind of listening, waiting for the sudden rise of wind, for the shout that a storm is coming, for the cry of someone lost in the dark. The children dream of sails. The father dreams of waves high enough to swallow a boat whole. The mother dreams of nothing at all, only of holding them safe until the morning comes. In their dreams, the sea never rests. It is a shifting, endless shape, a thing that loves and devours in the same breath. They have no choice but to live with it, to trust it, even as long as it takes. Soon, the first light will come, not from the sun, that will be slow to rise. It will come from the gulls, shrieking and wheeling overhead, from their wings beating the air above the shore, pulling the sleepers out of their shallow rest. And when they wake, there will be the smell of salt waiting for them, heavy and old, the same as it has been every morning of their lives. The father will go down the ladder, his feet finding the worn steps by memory. He will touch the oars as he passes. The children will rub their eyes with hands rougher than their years. The nets will be gathered, the ropes untied, and the boats pushed out once again into the same gray waters that cradled them through the night. And as the tide draws back, pulling the beach smooth again, the little loft above the nets will stand, empty, holding only the warmth of bodies that, like the sea, never truly sleep. For in this place, even in the deepest hour of the night, life belongs to the tide, and the tide belongs to no one.